0.012% of young players will get to the Premier League.
I get that, but not everyone is playing with the same odds. Who are you, and why does your work matter to our audience?
Okay, so I am Chris Platts. I'm a career coach. I have a PhD. I'm also the author of the largest independent study into career trajectories. And what I really want to do is shift power from clubs into the hands of players and their parents.
Let's drill into that.
I want them to know that using data, they can take ownership of player care, or as I call it, person care, because it is a person.
Hold on.
I'd say there's this data, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Between the ages of 18 and 26, only 5% of that group, that was 8 players, managed to move up the football pyramid. From an early age, we get this really romantic view of what being a professional footballer is. I think one of the big assumptions that's wrong is that every young boy who starts playing football in some sort of organised way has a dream of becoming a professional footballer.
Are you sure?
There just comes a point where player care and elite sport clash.
Chris, who are you, and why does your work matter to our audience?
Yeah, okay. So I am Chris Platts. I'm a career coach. I have a PhD that examines the lives of 303 young players, and I'm also the author of the largest independent study into career trajectories. So what I do now is I take that research and I disseminate it to young players and to their families so that they can do 3 things. They can predict the future, they can plan for their careers, and they can reduce the stresses that negatively impact on their performances and on their wider lives. With the end goal that more players are enjoying their time in football, knowing that whatever happens in their career, whether things turn out well in football or not, they'll be okay and they can thrive in wider life.
And what's the most important piece of data that would be relevant to parents who want their children to be footballers?
One piece or one set? I think it depends the point of the journey that you are at, if I'm honest. So early on in your journey, if you were, let's say you were in there at 9, 10, 11, 12, I'd probably be looking more at the longitudinal data, the quantitative data around probably what are the chances of the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years of progressing. I think when you get to scholarship and then beyond, if you're lucky enough, good enough to get that professional contract, yes, the quantitative data is useful, but I think by that point, I would be looking more at the qualitative data that I've got, the case studies, the experiences, the lived realities of being a professional footballer. If that's the way that I would approach it if I was a parent. I am a parent, but my kids aren't old enough to be footballers yet. They're 4 and 2. So that would be the way that I would advise somebody to approach this.
Okay. And this stat, 0.00000.1% of footballers making it. What's your thoughts around that as a statement that's often put out?
I think it's too simplistic. The one that I see the most is the 0.012% of young players will get to the Premier League. I think that became quite famous on the back of Michael Calvin's book and his BT Sport series, No Hunger in Paradise. And it's, look, the book can be quite useful. It's got some good insight to it, but fundamentally it just breaks down the stats. So if I talk you through how that's sort of worked out, what Calvin's done in there, he's taken every young boy who is playing any form of organised football, and he's then taken that, looked at how many players are in the Premier League only, and done a pretty basic and fundamental calculation to work out some sort of percentage. So I did it in preparation for this. There's around 3 million young boys, based on Sport England data. There's around 3 million young
What is young boys?
boys, so 16 and below. Yep, so 16 and below playing some form of organised football once a week. Then, if you look at how many players have then played in the Premier League, that's harder to do. But there's 20 teams in the Premier League. I know there are a couple of seasons where we had more than that, a 24 and a 22. But 20 teams over 30 years. It's now sort of been going, started in 1993. And let's assume that there's 30 players in a squad, give or take. That gives you roughly 18,000 players. Okay. There are some caveats here, but I'll come to those afterwards. So what Calvin's done is taken 18,000, divided it by 3 million, times by 100. And that's how we work out a percentage. So I did that, and that gives you a percentage of 0.6%. But then there's caveats with that, isn't there? Number one, that's assuming that all of those 18,000 players only play one season in the Premier League and then move on. Well, that's clearly not the case. I think one of the big assumptions that's wrong is that every young boy who starts playing football in some sort of organised way has a dream of becoming a professional footballer. That is fundamentally not the case. If you speak to boys who are 6, 7, 8, and they're playing organised football, sometimes even within the professional academy system, they can't conceptualise what a professional footballer is. They don't. It isn't them who often have these dreams. Some of them, most of them at that age, are playing simply for fun because, as many people, they got a passion. They love that feeling of kicking a ball about. So I think that's a fundamental problem. So going back to that 0.01 statistic, 99% don't make it. I don't like using just one headline statistic. I think it masks a complexity to it. It masks a lot of variables, dependent and independent variables. Those are things we can control, things we can't control. And fundamentally, it's of no use. It's of no use. Yes, it's very, very difficult to become a professional footballer. Your chances are very low. But by just throwing around that sort of headline figure, to me, raises more questions than it actually answers.
I totally agree. And I've been having arguments with people for a long time around this. I always pull people up when they keep saying, oh, you got more chance of being hit by lightning than becoming a footballer.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, I get that. But not everyone is playing with the same odds.
Correct.
I mean, is it worth sort of defining what is making it and what is a professional?
Yeah. So that, I think, that drills down into the first level of complexity about this stat.
Yeah.
So often when a statistic is revealed like that, it will be followed with or preceded with the chances of making it, or 99% won't make it. And my response to that is, as you've just raised there, Matt, what do you mean by making it? You have to be able to define it, and most people can't. So if we were to throw out some scenarios here, Matt, let's say you got a professional contract at the age of 18, and that was a 1-year pro contract. You had no appearances in the first team of the club who gave you that pro contract. They released you after a year. Did you make it?
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
No.
Sean, do you think you made it?
I mean, let's
No.
say, okay, hold on.
But you see what I'm getting at. You see what I'm getting at.
And you're absolutely right. Like, and we did a whole other episode where we're exploring this whole thing around 40% of footballers go bankrupt after playing football after 5 years, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And then I started to explore what happens with a lot of the players who go into Category 1 academies. They get a £300,000 a year contract. A lot of them will blow it all, on chasing the footballer lifestyle, thinking it's coming forever,
Yeah.
and then it won't, and then they get into bad spending habits that
Yeah.
then put them into a lot of debt. And anyway, people can go back and listen to that episode, which is a good one. But what I wanted to get into is that in terms of making it, let's say that you get that category 1 contract and you get 300,000 in your first year, and you are able to stow away that money, and you do build yourself a nest egg, and then all right, you fall out of football, but you've accumulated 250 grand that then is going to set you up to then have a business. Well, that is making it in some form.
Yep. Yeah.
If the goal is to be a professional football player, then
So I think the first discussion, and this is what I do with parents and their players, is to open up that. What is it that you are trying to get from football? What does it mean to you? You have to have that conversation, and you have to keep having that conversation. It can't be just an assumed thing. And that underpins, doesn't it, the problem of just let's talk about, did you make it? Because as we just highlighted with that sort of short, question, it's not that easy to define, and it changes. So you might have dreams of playing in the Premier League, but 3 years later, that might start. You're at a League Two club. Look, the reality is now that's probably, you're going to have to change your expectations. You're going to have to change what making it. You can still have a good career. You can still make money, but you've got to keep evaluating. You've got to keep monitoring what you mean by this, what it means for your spending habits. So yeah, that's the first thing to do. What for you? What would making it be?
Well, just in terms of the salaries, because before coming into the episode, we just pulled out some broad data that's available, and Premier League, yeah, man, if you make it into that, amazing, and you can sustain a career. People are saying the average is 60,000 a week in the Premier League. Amazing. Yep. If you Google the stats that come from Glassdoor, the average professional footballer wage is 26,000 a year. Mm. So they're pulling it in from all leagues.
Yeah.
And then we went to Championship. It seems to range 350,000 to 500,000 a year.
Yeah.
So you compare that to sort of bankers, or that's a great career. League One, 150,000 per year. League Two, 65,000 a year.
Yeah.
And then National League, 50,000 a year average.
Yeah. Just a quick caveat with that though, and I see what you're saying with banker, but that isn't. What's the average length of that career? So you got to be careful with that. So you say, oh, you're getting 150 grand a year for 8 years. So the average, the amount that you're getting per year, great, but it isn't going to, as it would with a banker, extend over a period of 25 years, 30 years, whatever that might be. So
that's such a good point. It's such a good point, because the longevity of a career in football is so short. Don't the average retire around 30? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've got data on this.
No, well, it compete. I think it's something like 28.9 years. Some of that is difficult to predict as well, and we're back to the using the data. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in here is about using reliable data, but then using it reliably. The retirement age is a really good example of that, because when do you accept that somebody has officially retired from professional football is really difficult. If they're in semi-professional football, for example, have they retired? Have they, to coin the term, hung up their boots? That's a bit of a difficult one. So I think that's why it ends up with a slightly competing range of numbers, but it's not going to be
10 years at your peak compared to 40 years in banking.
Yeah, that's what we're
to.
talking about, aren't we? Yeah, and I did a little bit of research, just throwing out sort of a poll and based on some data that I'd got on wages, and most people overestimate how much a footballer earns. Most people overestimate how much a footballer earns, and I think particularly when you look at League One and League Two, I think we do overestimate at that level. I also think there's a real interesting space around wages in the championship because of the disparity between the top and the bottom of the championship. So we look at the moment of the teams that are in there and the wage bills of those towards the top end who've got parachute payments, the likes of Burnley, Sheffield United. We've had Leicester down there, and then look alongside, let's say, a Rotherham and Oxford, who are up there at the moment. You look at the wage structure of those two clubs, real disparity.
And so with all the data that you've accumulated over the years, with all your research, this year you've now set up a business to help parents and players.
Yeah. So I've been going for about 6 months now, career coaching. And what I really want to do is shift power from clubs into the hands of players and their parents. I want them to know that using data, they can take ownership of player care, or as I call it, person care, because it is a person. And this can be data driven. You can literally sit down with me. We can plug where you are into the data. We can predict the next 5 to 10 years of how this is going to play out.
Really?
You can plan for it.
Let's drill into that.
Yeah, let's go.
Go on then. So yeah, how do we plan? How do you plan for 5 years?
So, having said all of this about the statistics, one thing that I start with is let's not talk too much about statistics. And I'll give you an example for that. So, Sean, you come to me and say, right, I'm 16. What's the next 10 years going to look like? Here's what I'm going to say to you, right?
What category club am I playing at?
Yes, okay, let's...
I want to be
where do you want to play?
I want to be at Chelsea.
Go on then. Are you at Chelsea? Okay. So, we're at Chelsea.
Nice.
So, we're at category 1. Let's say... He's laughing his head off. What's that?
You've not seen him play.
So we say, now this is what will happen, all right? I will say there's an 80% chance that you're going to get a professional contract, okay? 5 years after that, there's a really good chance, a really, really good chance that you're going to be playing League 2 or lower.
Oh, come on.
Okay?
That's not what I want to hear.
Okay. So, based on that, okay, let's say if we boil it down and we would look at sort of when you're born in the year, those sorts of things come into there as well. But let's say we work it out and we say, look, there's a 10% chance that you're going to have a career of 10 years, all right? There's a 50% chance that you're going to be released and you're going to have to find another job. Now, in that scenario, if we were rational human beings, we would put more effort into planning for our time away from professional football than we would for our time in professional football, right? 50% chance versus a 10% chance. But we aren't rational human beings. We're not rational. I know full well that you are going to put most of your effort into making it as a professional footballer. And that is absolutely your right, and that needs to be the case. You know, I'm not here to say, right, well, I'm ripping that dream away from you. Give up. What's the point? Okay?
Yeah, because for 12 years I've been practicing. I've been practicing since I've been 4 years old. My parents were invested in this.
Yeah.
I'm different. I'm going to make it. I practice more than the other players.
Yeah, that's it. You're different. So you tell me that. Everybody tells me that. So let's not mess with the numbers in that sense. How about we look at all the players who were at Category 1, or in my data it was Premier League, Championship, League 1, League 2. How about we look at all the players in that sample and we look at every route, okay? And you plan for everything. How about you develop a playbook which, whatever comes up, you go, okay, I'm disappointed with that, but we've planned for it. I've been released and I've been taken to a League 1 club, and actually that hasn't worked out, and now I'm on loan at a League 2 club. Well, actually 4 years ago, Chris told me about this, and we talked about it, and we kept talking about it. And it didn't distract me from my dream of playing in the Premier League, playing in the Champions League. But it was an appreciation that I can actually understand what a football career is like, and I can plan for it. We don't have to get drawn into the either or with that. So we can sit down, plug you into the data. You can start developing your academy diary. You can start reflecting. You can start on talking about what are the things you're doing to develop your football career. Really good example of that is learning a language, and then that, and how applicable that can be within football and outside of football. And at the same time, we can be talking about the different scenarios in which this plays out, and it's no different to how we coach.
Can I throw at you what the scenario might be if you're at a Cat 2 academy, and how young would you potentially think about thinking like that and planning like that?
Yeah. I don't think there's any need to start planning in that sense until you are 13, 14 years old. Now, partly that is because, and I know we were talking about this before, it's very difficult to highlight a child who is 10, 11, 12, who are going to be able to get all the way and make a professional contract. If you get given something at 10 or 11 and you get signed to a club, all you have done is shown that you are the best lad who is 11 years old at that club. No more than that. I came third once. I came third in a swimming gala for the city of Sheffield when I was 12. All I did was show that I was third best in that race in the city of Sheffield at 12. I did not show I'm going to get to the Commonwealth Games or the Olympic Games. I didn't. It's too early, So there's only really, I think, a need to start looking at this data and engaging with it. I think before that, I would be in the space of, are they thriving? Are they enjoying themselves? Are they on that pitch looking like they are wanting to be there? And are they getting wider things from that experience? Are they making friends? Are they building some confidence? That's the space that I would be in.
I'm just going to interrupt the podcast for 30 seconds to tell you about We Make Footballers. We Make Footballers are the largest football coaching provider to children aged 4 to 12 in the UK, operating across 200 facilities. We focus on developing the individual, working on the technical and physical components of the game, and it's had amazing results, with hundreds of our ex-players joining professional academies and 4 of our ex-players currently playing in the Premier League. Our program is built around small-sided play using indoor and outdoor facilities. Visit our website, wemakefootballers.com, to see if we have a training facility in your area. Let's go back to me being a 16-year-old star player at Chelsea, and you are telling me, look, there's all this data that chances are it's not going to happen, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening.
I wouldn't say that.
All right.
Yeah, but go on. I'd say there's this data. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're proposing alternatives and you're talking about those preparations, and I'm already thinking of the mindset of what it's like being a 16-year-old that has had all this experience, and you're just fully just dreaming. Everything is just football. Are you saying, well, look, we need to put some time aside to go on a plumbing course? Or what you said another language, but what time is being carved out? Because I don't want to go and do plumbing when I'm preparing to be a Chelsea player. Mm-hmm. And also, if I start practicing plumbing, I'm getting tired from my football, and I'm not going to have as much chance as the other players that are fully dedicated.
Yeah, and that's the conversation that needs to be had. That there's some, it might not be plumbing, but there is a time where you can escape, you can have a break from football without it impacted on your ability to perform on a pitch. Everybody in a highly pressurized scenario, which scholars are in, needs time to release that stress, need time to decompress, whatever phrase we want to use. So the discussions can be around it can be both. And that when you're a professional footballer, you need a time when you are away from being a professional footballer. You need time where you can escape the pressures of the game. It's no different when you're a scholar. It's exactly the same process. So it's not about, again, either or. And we do, I think, get too caught up in the right. I've got to be watching clips of football. I'm in my room and I'm relaxing, but I could be on YouTube. I could look at my performances. I've got an app from the club and I could be looking at the clips that they've sent me and those things. You can do that, but if you're doing that all the time, there's a chance that it can have a negative impact on
Yeah.
you as much as it has a positive impact on you. So it's wrapping it up in a conversation about decompressing, about escapism,
Yeah.
about leisure,
Yeah.
which is what we all need. And by the way, when you are a professional footballer, you need to be doing that as well.
But those things, and I'm thinking also about like meditation. There's so much
Yeah.
people talk around Cole Palmer, and he comes across that he's this like clear mind, that all he's thinking about is football, and the other time is just sort of free space. And so then that decompression time or time walking around in nature and things, like that's so positive, but that's not learning another profession. That if you start building in B plans as well as being a footballer, then is it not too much? Is too much going on in the player's mind, and then they can't think clearly when they're playing?
No, but it's different for each player. And the process that we go through is about them taking ownership of that. So if that's what they're thinking, and that is how they're feeling, that's a good conversation to be having now. If they're starting to develop that self-awareness at the age of 16 or 17, that look, there's too much going on. I see that as a positive because they're opening up and they're talking about those things. And it could be that the conversation turns to, right, we need to redraft this playbook. And if I don't get a professional contract at 18, then this is how I'm going to do. Because for me, as a player at the moment, I can't deal with trying to get this scholarship and do this other thing that I thought I would want to do. That's fine.
Let's say you get the pro contract at 18. Matthew, what's the stat with Ajax that you're always throwing around?
It's something like, somebody can fact check it, but it's something like if you get a scholar at Ajax at under 16, it's something crazy like an 85% chance you're going to sign a pro. So, but what that means, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we spoke about, like, could that be pro in Holland League 2? Or is that a pro for Ajax? It's a very vague stat. But yeah, under 16, if you get a scholar at Ajax, there's like an 85% chance you're going to sign a pro somewhere.
I think Chelsea have something similar as well. And then once you then do get a pro contract at a club like Chelsea, Man City, Man United, then you again have something like a 90% chance of being a professional footballer. Where that sits, it could be playing out in America.
Yeah. We found similar. So 81% of scholars who were at a Premier League academy were given a professional contract at the age of 18. So 81%. So it aligns with the Ajax stat. I think that's a decent shout. It's probably a fair claim. I think there are some caveats, and we started to touch on that, that there's a new phrase within football, which is the facilitator players. And those are players who essentially make up the numbers. I've interviewed coaches who've gone on record as saying this. Some have said this off the record. They simply can't play with 3 players or 5 players. There has to be a squad to choose from. And the reality of the situation is there are players who are given professional contracts, 1 year, 2 year contracts at the age of 18, and they kind of make up the numbers in the under 21 squads. It depends on the club that you're at, because some have under 21s or under 23s for a bit. And I think that potentially skews the data. So that's why I come back to looking at the career trajectories is so important. Looking at this over a longer period of time gives younger players and parents, and us all, I think, a better appreciation of what we are likely to be facing as we go forward. So the caveat with the 81% or the 80% at Ajax or something like that would be how many of those were deemed facilitator players, what happened to those, how many were left at Ajax after 2 years or 3 years, and what ultimately for me I would be asking what was the trajectory of those players, where did they end up?
It's such a brutal term, facilitator players.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I mean, I can understand how, but it's good for parents to be hearing that this is a sort of term that's
Yes.
being used in the coaching world.
Yeah.
I think it rings true in academy football as well.
Definitely.
There are clubs that are signing boys at under 9, under 10.
Oh, you mean foundation phases?
Yeah,
Right.
to make up the numbers.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that gets put out in the media a lot is those goalkeepers. I think Carson is one who never plays.
Yeah.
Who's just like
He's still a facilitator player.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, goalkeepers, they need to have a good amount of goalkeepers just for goalkeeper training, because if it's just 2, they get lonely, and so they need some extra people in there. Yeah. There's a kid that we coached a long time ago who's ended up becoming a professional goalkeeper,
Yeah.
but doesn't actually get first team appearances, but technically he's a professional footballer. Who knows what pay? But that, and then under 23s, we've seen it where they need to have 11 players, they need to have people to train. They might only be interested in the value of a few players, but then there's others that, they're just ticking along, and they will then eventually just drift out of football.
Yeah. How does he feel about that? Are you still in contact with him?
No, we're not in contact. No.
That would be a really interesting conversation.
Do you think it's sort of right that academies will take on facilitator players? So again, we just know for a fact that academies will have their star players, the ones that they think are going to go on and progress.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of the next level where, they're good enough to be in the academy, and there's still that. Then there's the next level of player who they know aren't going to make it, and they are there to make up the numbers. Yeah, is that right on the academy to do that?
Help the group is a phrase that's often used within foundation phase academy football.
Right.
So-
Yeah. I'm going to sound like a politician when I say this. I have come to realise that my role in this is not to try and highlight what I think is right, because ultimately I don't think that I can get in and change that. I think elite sport, so I'm not just talking about football now, elite sport, Olympic elite sport is a tough environment, and there is some collateral damage from just the thing that is elite sport. Yeah, we are pushing mind, body, soul to the edge all the time for top level performances in all sport. So I look at it and think, is it right? Is it wrong? It just is the way it is. Mm. So that then moves me to a place of saying we need to educate and get to the parents and the young players and say, look, go for this, but don't go for this without knowing what this is going to be like, and keep going for it until you don't want it anymore. Not that the club doesn't want it anymore, until you don't want it anymore. And then in that space, you have taken ownership of your career and you've realised what football is. It isn't you. It doesn't define you. If you don't get that professional contract or you don't stay in there for 10 years, that doesn't define you as a person. You are bigger than that. You know, what's your purpose on this planet? So that's where I've moved to. It's quite a philosophical point.
No,
I
because
love that.
I think that's the missing
class.
piece. Because we're not. Well, you are for Chelsea, but we're not sitting in every academy listening to the conversations. So we have to take the parents' word for what it is. But it does feel like there's a big miscommunication between clubs and parents, where it needs to be just so much more rational and logical than that. Where when I talk to the parents and you talk to the players at the academy, their heads are in the clouds a little bit.
Yeah.
And and I know it's like, enjoy what you're doing and celebrate the fact that you have hit that milestone. But that piece feels like it's missing.
Yeah, from a club's perspective, it's not attractive to sit someone down in a room, get them to sign a contract and say, congratulations, you're here to make up the numbers. You're here to help the other players who we think have got a good chance of succeeding. Or you're a facilitator player?
Facilitator player.
It's not, but there needs to be something that...
No, I mean, I think outside in a conversation like this, making parents understand, getting the education out, this is what you're talking
Yeah.
about,
Yes.
so that parents can go in with open eyes, and then it just becomes like far more conscious about the decisions. Because you made the point there around the goalkeeper, and you said, I wonder how he feels. And I was making the scenario of me being that Chelsea player, training from 4 years old up to 16, 12 years of effort. Just, you're all in. Imagine every conversation, every dinner table, every car journey, just praying, all of this. So you do not want to be told anything other that I can make it. And so then to then sort of feel like, oh, well, I'm a facilitator, you just don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
So if you got to be, let's say, the goalkeeper, a third choice at a League Two club, well, technically he's made it.
Yeah.
And his dad can tell the friends at the pub, my son made it as a footballer.
Yeah.
They've achieved it. And then you might be in a bad situation. You might be living in an area of England that you're not happy in. You might be on a lower wage than you'd like to be living on. Yeah. But you've made your parents happy, and you've technically achieved your dream that has been then conditioned on you from a young age. So then you're potentially stuck in a career that, wow, how did I end up here?
Yeah, and I think that can happen because from an early age, we get this really romantic view of what being a professional footballer is.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it sounds really weird, but those people who are millionaires in football, they don't all enjoy it. They don't all absolutely love that lifestyle. There are footballers who've got a lot of money playing in the Premier League who are also struggling. So sometimes I think we uncritically link the making it, oh, okay, but you get to the Premier League and then you're a multimillionaire and you get into... We know there are players in there who are struggling with their mental health. Often they don't then say it until they've retired, and they're a bit able to be a bit more open about what's going on. But I think it can be common to just get socialised into, I'm a footballer, I'm working my way up. Then I'm 18 and I get that pro contract, and by 23, be in a scenario of, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like, but now what do I do? Because everybody's looking at me thinking, this must be brilliant. You're playing for whoever it might be in League One. You get to be a footballer, but you're not earning loads of money. It's not setting you up for life. We know it's precarious. There could be loans in there. Now there's issues that come in with perhaps relationships, you're having children. It's then a tricky life. But to the outside world, it's what a job though. That I think is a difficult thing.
And that's it.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, like one player I work with, his dad purposefully takes him to lower league football, so non-league football, just to really broaden his horizons on what being a professional footballer is, and for him to appreciate that's probably the level you're going to be playing at. Even though you're at an academy at the moment, the chances are you're going to slip out of it. I just thought it was really refreshing to actually hear a parent take that approach and make his son realise there's more to football than just Stamford Bridge, and going to sort of good non-league football and saying this is also professional, and this is probably, if we keep pursuing football, this is probably where we're going to end up.
I think also, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about how people just get swept along in the competition and the purpose, and this is what we're going to do, and then they leave themselves no other choice.
Yeah,
that phrase that's used of like burn the boats, and we don't look back. Maybe just really quickly for context on that phrase, just a clarification. I don't know, like there was some like old fable about some warlord that took over his troops to attack an island, and they had far less troops than the opposition. And so then what he then did is, once all the soldiers got off the boats, the leader turned around and just set fire to them all. And then he said to his army, he said, right, we've got no other option. We either go here and win this island, or we all die. And so then that's where this phrase "burn the boats." I've paraphrased a lot of that, but yeah, people are going into football, burning their boats, no other options. That's it. And then yeah, like the story that I was thinking about as well is that when we did the interview with the Scunthorpe lads. Again, promoting another episode. Like, you should go back and listen to that. Don't know what number it is. Anyway, Regan, really, really cool guy. Like, top lad. Really, he's the captain at Scunthorpe. Is he still the captain?
No, he's not at Scunthorpe anymore.
Oh, he's left. Okay. But yeah, he's a cool guy. Anyway, we heard this interview from him. Now, he's Australian. He'd come over and he went to Accrington Stanley, their academy, and he went over from Australia at the age of 13.
Mm-hmm.
His family couldn't really find a good level of football for him in Australia, so they said, right, you're a good player, we're gonna move you to England, and then you can become a footballer there. And I think he had a few trials at various different clubs, and then got the academy contract offer at the age of 13. Have I told this correctly so far,
so,
Matt? Yeah. So I'm listening to this, and also I've known that the wages at Scunthorpe at the time was something like 30,000 a year, roughly, maybe. But you know, this idea of making it, and I said to him, "Oh, so did you have any siblings?" And he's like, "Yeah, you know, my sister, and I think she was a few years older." And I was like, "Well, so everyone, the whole family, moved over to England to pursue your football at age 13?" And he's like, yeah, and you know, I've become a footballer. I was like, well, how did your sister feel about losing the sunshine of Australia? And she's like, she's all right. Yeah, she's happy in England now. It's worked out. But I was thinking, oh, you know, you've moved the whole family over at that age. You've left no other choice. Like, even if you're not happy at 17, 18 pursuing football, how can you tell your parents, you know what, we made a bad decision, I shouldn't have done this?
But wouldn't a lot of people that have made it say, no, there's no plan B, it's only plan A, you got to burn the boats? And that's how they made it. A lot of people would say the reason they made it was because they gave themselves no other option.
Yeah, right, there's a lot to unpack there, so let's take this one at a time. First of all, I subscribe to it, it's all plan A. Because I think once you start talking about plan B, you fall into that trap of the footballer or parents going, we're going to deal with that when we need to. And that is how people react. So look at people who have strokes or have heart attacks. They have those and then they change their diet, knowing full well from being educated that their lifestyle is pushing them towards having a stroke or a heart attack. It happens and they go, oh, I nearly swore then. Can we swear?
Yeah, swear.
Oh shit, I best change my diet. That is how people generally act. So I think if we go in and start saying, look, everybody needs a plan B, even subconsciously, it's just not going to ring true. So we have to move to a thought process of, look, this is all plan A. Everybody in every career will have moments where things go wrong. Yours is different because you're in elite sport and you're planning or hoping or training for from a far younger age than people who become a mechanic or a doctor or something like that. So that is slightly different, but they're not mutually exclusive. So I think it's all got to be plan A. With the getting swept along with it in your example, I think it's important to stress that this isn't the parents' fault. And sometimes, I think sometimes some commentary can stray towards like, what are they doing? Well, it's when you become a parent, that the emotion that goes with that, and it comes back to something you said, Matt, earlier about, I think it was you, Matt, between the communication between the clubs and the parents. It's really hard to understand the emotion that goes with and the pride that goes with having a young child who's achieving, and you see them building confidence and those things. So again, it's trying to get to parents going, look, go with this, but you don't have to forego that pride and the belief that you have in them. we can actually talk about all of this all at the same time. So it's really difficult, I think, for clubs to communicate that to parents. I have this conversation a lot. Clubs aren't honest, and I'm thinking, can they be honest? Can they not? And I sort of seesaw back and forwards. I think earlier on, in a child's life, they can be a bit more honest. I don't think there's an issue with a club saying, look, you're 10 years old. We think you've got some potential, so we're keeping you, but we're talking about another 8 years of development. You might be way off by the time you get to 16. The reality is we don't know that. And the research will tell you that anybody out there saying to a 10-year-old, by 21, you're going to be unbelievable, is lying. There is no chance. There's far too much luck involved. There's far too many variables involved. We don't know when the growth spurt's going to come. There's loads going on. We don't know injuries. There's loads going on there.
On that point, sorry, because it's just a nice reminder for me.
Yeah.
Any parent that is working with a coach and the coach says in 7, 8, 10 years time, your son is going to be worth 100 million. Or
Who's saying that?
I've seen on Instagram.
Really?
I'll show you afterwards. I'll show you the account. Literally, coaches taking. I mentioned before. Literally, coaches taking pictures of 8, 9, 10-year-olds, putting it on their Instagram profile.
Yeah.
This player is going to be worth 100 million in the future. Or it's criminal that this player isn't at an academy. He should be. He's so great.
Yeah.
If you're a parent and the coach that you're working with is doing that, run a mile.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that because it starts to really infuriate me.
Yeah, right. And there's just no way you can tell. There's just no way you can tell that. Absolutely no chance.
I want to come back to what you were talking there around mindset of player, parent, how they can get themselves swept along and trying to understand from their perspective how it can happen. A guy who's involved in the show a lot, a guy called Darius Charles. He was a footballer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. Played for Wickham and AFC Wimbledon. And I really liked it when he talked about how footballers are crazy because they're breaking the data. Because they are doing something that's so hard to do and they're beating the odds, they just believe in themselves that they are different.
Yeah.
And it's the same with some of the business people, the CEOs. They end up, the ones who become successful, because they've beaten odds, they can believe they're sort of invincible and things. Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell talks about a story in his book, The Bomber Mafia, where he talks about how during World War II in London, no one left London. People carried on living there despite being bombed constantly. And when their neighbours would get bombed, the people that would carry on walking and living in London, they would say, well, I'm not being bombed, I survive. And then they start having this invincibility feeling.
Survivor bias.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah. So survivor bias is a thing, and it's when you start to attribute surviving to the way that you've been acting or the way that you've done things. So what you do is you end up with a causal relationship, which is to say, I've been acting this way and I've ended up here. Therefore, the reason I've ended up here is because I've been acting this way. When the actual reality could be, that's not a phrase. The reality could be, I've ended up here and I've been acting this way, but I've ended up here despite acting this way. It is a phrase that NASA have used a lot, where they went through a really difficult time with the explosion of Challenger and had to really sort of reevaluate everything that they were doing, and that was one of the things. There's a really good book around that, and it's trying to disassociate that causal relationship between I'm here and I've been acting this way. So the reason I'm here is because I'm acting this way. That's not always the case. But those who've gone through the system and get to be professional footballers, and I hear this a lot with, we're having to, when players come off the pitch now, we're having to say, did you enjoy yourself? People are saying, don't focus on things that went wrong. Did they enjoy themselves? And those sorts of things. Well, when I went through the system, this is how it was. Okay. You went through the system and it was like that, where people were critical of you and you became a pro. That doesn't mean you became a pro because people were critical of you. It's a different mindset. But survivor bias that's that problem.
And you can see why that happens with footballers.
And it's a self-perpetuating thing, isn't it? Where those people who get through the system then advocate for the way it's been.
They can't think that the data is going to apply to them.
Yeah, that's it. So what you're trying to do is to get them to. It's trying to have conversations which takes people to a slightly different level of, look, there are multiple realities. There are people who've got to the top of professional football through various routes. Just because Jude Bellingham got to the top and is that level of player and this was his route, you can't simply pick that up and then apply it to every other person and think, therefore we're going to make Jude Bellingham the way he is. Jude Bellingham may have got to where he is in spite of some of the things that occurred to him.
Going back to, so ultimately we were looking to fulfill a player's potential. So if you start thinking about like the plan B and doing things outside of football, what about other sports outside of football? And is there any research or do you have any thoughts on the kind of the multi-sport approach? And if players are playing a lot of another sport when they're younger, is that going to hinder or help their football?
Yeah. Take it back to the conversation of why does the child want to do what he's doing? And we're talking about males here there, but we could easily apply it to females as well. Are you having that conversation when they're 9, 10, 11 years old? And if you're having that conversation, there is research that suggests at that young age, because there is no way of saying at 9, 10, 11 that they are going to be a professional footballer, you are better giving them a wider sporting repertoire and focusing more on physical literacy, okay, which is like literacy in other subjects, of balance, of coordination, of reading different scenarios. And now this is where it's going to clash with probably some of the ideals around the thought processes that parents have. At that age, I still think you are training a child to simply be involved in sport and physical activity for as long as they can be in their life, because it's a good thing for their health, for their social well-being. You're not, at the age of 8, 9, 10, really training them to be a professional footballer. You might be training them to be, a good athlete, a good all-rounder, be able to coordinate themselves. But if there is no way of guaranteeing that at 8, 9, 10, they're going to get to 21 and be in professional football, it seems silly to me to then get rid of other opportunities. They're only allowed to play football at a certain amount of time anyway, aren't they? At that age, it varies as they go through the age. Yeah. Oh, look, if a boy's picking up a football and knocking around a street or a backyard or in a garden and just enjoying themselves and setting their own parameters, knock yourself out. Like, because that is them enjoying themselves. That's them picking a ball up and,
but then to
finding their own boundaries.
To have the best chance of being in a professional game at 21, don't you have to have that almost sort of hardcore approach at 9, 10, really concentrating on it and getting, because the other boys are, and you have to try and keep up with them.
Yeah, but there is research which would show that, say, playing even a racket sport, playing another team sport, is still developing some of those attributes that you then use later on in if you were to carry on going in life. You know, aerobic fitness that might come with swimming or something like that. Just you see what I mean? It doesn't have to be all.
Is there an age then you think you then need to be all in on football?
I don't know. I don't know whether I could back that up with
was-
research per se.
Yeah, I've seen some of that data. Because I get sent it a lot. There's an Australian person who has got this big speech that goes viral on the internet of saying, "Oh, it's so important that you do multi-sports. No one can predict where someone can get to," and that kind of thing. And like, I can see it for other sports, but football, I think you do need to be practicing touching that ball a lot at young ages, because I've seen doing this 20 years. If you're a kid who might be brilliant athletically at 12 years old, but you haven't touched a ball, you haven't really trained, it's very, very hard to catch up into the high academy levels. It's hard. Not to say that it's impossible, but I don't know if you have got any data around the footballers who make it and how many of them started at academies at 8 years old and 7 years old. You do? All right.
I can dig down into some of that if you want.
Okay.
So just on that. So here's the philosophical dilemma in that, isn't it? Let's say we had a boy who wasn't playing other sports and was picking up the ball and was going out into the back garden and improving that touch. They'd got a wall or something like that, and they're knocking the ball against the wall, left foot, right foot. They're developing touch. Let's say they went and played, so my sport's field hockey. Let's say they go and play field hockey, okay? They're going to be in scenarios playing field hockey where the game that they are seeing in front of them and in coaching sessions and the training, they are developing cognitive skills of patterns of play, of unfolding, being able to spot a through pass, those sorts of things. So it becomes very difficult to hypothesize one against the other. Do you see what I mean? And I think that's where it becomes probably like a cyclical debate of is there a right or a wrong. I think this probably is a personal view. I would be going back to where are they thriving, what are they enjoying doing the most, and if at 9, 10, even if at 9 or 10 years old they are saying to me, I want to be a professional footballer, therefore I just want to play football, two things would strike me. I would be saying, number one, a 9 or a 10-year-old does not know what being a professional footballer is.
Are you sure? Like, they play FIFA, they collect cards.
Yeah, but they don't know the realities of being a professional footballer, do they? They think they know what being a professional
Cole
footballer
Palmer is being a professional football player to them, isn't it?
So I would say to the parents, right, they don't know exactly yet. That's like me saying, I want to be a pop star. I don't know. It's at 9 or 10, I didn't know the stresses that went with exposing myself to the fame and the glamour and that sort of stuff. There's no way. And number two, I would be saying, there's no way of predicting whether they are going to make that or not. So you still have to keep one eye on giving them some other experiences.
Other experiences, but diluting your football training program with other sports, loads of other sports.
Yeah, so it's a balance.
Less
I'm not saying
chance.
it's loads.
So it just seems a little bit from the way the conversation's going that the other options are more other sports. I'm thinking, right, if the kid is decent and showing like they're all right at football at 6, 7 years old, all right, let's give this a go, but let's make sure they're really good at maths. Let's make sure that they understand how to run a YouTube channel. Let's work out how accounting works. I don't know, like start giving them tools to survive. Start teaching them how ChatGPT works.
Yeah.
These are things that are going to make them hopefully a human who can survive and enjoy life, not necessarily be a tennis player, football player. Like, sport is not the only option.
No.
I mean, I think that I know some clubs do it already. I think there'll be more of a trend of it where clubs are really taking ownership of everything that the players are doing. And they start incorporating things like tennis and hockey, and they'll start. So then instead of a player going to play hockey once a week, they can do a session with the club, and the club will incorporate the really good elements of the hockey into a 30-minute drill within an hour and a half session.
Yeah.
And then they can still tag the football on afterwards as well.
At Chelsea,
Yeah.
I remember one of the directors said in the past, he said like there's been a real decline that they've noticed over the last 20 years in school PE lessons. Some PE teachers might react and say, no, it's great at our school. But on the whole in England, PE has really declined. So then Chelsea made sure they brought with their movement coaches roly-polies, climbing up ropes. You always laugh when I say roly-polies, like cartwheels. They wanted to make the children have good movement, coordination, physical literacy. That's
in
the
Europe,
term, exactly.
it's very popular, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
On that research, I bet someone just went to all the professional footballers, maybe they got like 2,000 footballers, and said, all right, you've made it, you're a professional. Did you play tennis when you were younger? Did you play hockey? Yeah, I had a game when I was on holiday once. And they're like, right, ticks that box. Yep, you've got to play multi-sports when you're a kid, because look, all these professionals did it.
As an advocate for research, I can't comment until I've read that article, because I don't want to slander whoever did that research. But dig down. I think fundamentally what we're discussing here is, where do you sit philosophically at 9, 10, 11 as a parent in how you want to approach this? Do you want to put onto your son or daughter that we're going to do football only? Because I think at the age of 9, 10, 11, most of the decisions come from the parents on how they're going to approach this. I would say you don't have to do that. There can be a degree of keeping them involved in other things that they are interested in. It isn't going to simply end the chances by allowing them to do a swimming lesson a week, or those, you know what I mean? That's what I think needs to be.
Of course.
I would say from experience as well, it's when it's secondary school and they get introduced to other sports at a slightly more competitive level, and the school are wanting to play rugby or basketball, or spend more time doing athletics or whatever it is. That's when because I can remember personally playing at school, I sound like a wanker, but I was very, very good at rugby.
Yeah.
I was pressured a lot by my PE teachers. Matt, you got a career in rugby, take it seriously. So 2-3 times a week when I should have been playing football, I was getting pressured to play rugby for the school team. Yeah. And then that's a big chunk of the week being dedicated towards rugby and not football. And I think,
if only you hadn't played that rugby, you would have made it. If only.
I back myself to say that. You know how good I was. Yeah.
Did you give us the stats?
No, we didn't. Yeah, should we go?
We went on a tangent. Yeah, I just was checking. I was like, did I miss that?
So, under 9s, this isn't my work. So I did some digging around how we can pull all this out. And we've got some international comparisons here as well, so I think that's quite useful. So if we were to go to the under 9s, this is the Football Association research on this from 2015. They did some research with what they term the top clubs. So I don't know who those clubs were. I don't know how many clubs when you read the work on it. But what they found was that 0.5% of under 9 players got all the way through and made an appearance in a first 11 in the Football League.
So not necessarily at their club.
So not necessarily at their club, which I think we should come on to actually about the movement and things as well.
Oh, that's not good.
So yeah, it's the way it is. So that's,
in England,
so that's your under. Yes, yeah.
Repeat it one more time.
0.5% of under 9s players,
right,
got all the way through to the ranks of playing in a first 11.
Sorry, is that one academies or all academies?
No, that'll be
it
all.
just said top clubs. It said in top clubs.
In top clubs.
Yeah, under 9s just termed it top clubs. I don't know how many top clubs that was. I don't know who the clubs were, and that was from 2015. Now, so that's your under 9s
that is
picture.
Quite a long time ago, though. 2015. I suppose that is still your Reece Jameses.
Yeah,
that's that age group. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
You'd say that's still the modern academy era.
Yeah, you're right. So. Yeah. And then you were going to compare it internationally.
Yeah, so then I tried to pick, so my research really picks up from the under 16s, the scholarship group. So I then started digging around the under 15s. I get asked a lot by parents about different countries, and the differences there. So there's a study in Spain, and it's just come out actually. So it's 2024. So this is good. It says two clubs from Madrid. So I don't know, work out what that is. But 6.1% of players who were in the under 15s made it to a professional level. So I would take that as being they got a professional contract. We're not talking about appearances there. So I'll say that again. They were in the system at 15, under 15s. 6.1% of that group made it to a professional level.
Okay.
It'd be really good if that group of researchers, Moran et al.
So sorry, just going
followed
back
this group.
Just going back to that data again on 2015. So the data was taken then.
Yeah.
So then that would really be for footballers who came in at 2005.
Yes.
So for Chelsea, that would have been Dominic Solanke, Tammy Abraham, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It had been when Roman Abramovich just came into Chelsea, and that was our under 8s and under 7s around that sort of time. So yeah, it's relevant.
Yeah,
it is relevant.
Yeah, they're still in there. And then there's another study from Italy, and I really like this one because they got 2,030 players. So that's a really, really big sample. Very, very good. And they looked at them from the under 15s to the under 21s. So between 1975 and 2001. Really, really good sample. So if you had played under 15s, under 16s, under 17s, under 18s, under 19s, and under 21s between 1975 and 2001, you were included in the study.
Right.
All right. So that's why it gave that big sample. From those 2,030 players, 182 got to the national senior team. Okay. So that's 8.9%. 2.9%, 58 players played at a Euros or a World Cup. So the slight difference on that one is not from the academy system, but this is the group of people that I come across a lot where I represented England at under 16s. I represented England at under 17s, and then it just sort of fell away. So again, that's Italy, but it's really looking at representing your country at an age group under 15s to under 21s, and how many then actually made it to that senior appearance. 8.9% got into the senior team. So under 10% of players who play in the age group categories for the country in Italy, this is, then got to the senior level, and under 3% of them were able to represent their country at Euros or a World Cup. I thought that was quite an interesting study because it's such a big sample. Really, really good.
How do you think internationally English academies are performing?
To me, the data suggests in quite a similar way. I think the difference is the number of professional leagues that we have in this country probably gives a bit more of an opportunity for players to get that first and potentially second contract. So when we look at this longitudinally, there are a lot of players who will move down the football pyramid in England and realistically can be paid probably down to step 6. So even if we're still Conference North, Conference South, National League North, National League South, sorry, there's still wages in there. So I think that probably gives a little bit of an advantage to the academies in this country that there are exit routes within the game. That would be my take on it. Yeah, I think it just gives a bit more of an option.
People in the comments, they criticise, or they're always saying English academies are no good. What, 99% failure rate, or like only 0.1% make it? But then there are only so many positions on a football pitch. There are only so many teams.
Yep.
There are only so many job opportunities to be a footballer. So it doesn't necessarily mean that English academies are worse, and potentially the English players, sorry to interrupt, go on then, Matthew.
I was going to say, but the argument is the resources that English academies have compared to. I've been to Ajax. Comparing Ajax to Cobham is like a 1-star hotel to a 5-star hotel.
Yeah.
So the English academies, the resources and the money they have compared to these other academies that are producing just as many of that quality player. That's
Alright,
where
so it could be,
it's-
argued that they could do better, but ultimately, are they producing a lot of professional footballers who are going out to play in other countries? I think now with the Saudi league, they seem to be pulling over a lot of like English players.
If Ajax, if Sporting, if I can't remember the academy in Argentina, but I think the top 3 academies in the world when you look at the
Chelsea are number 2. Yeah,
top
on the
3,
one that I've seen.
when you look at the amount of players that are going on to sign pros,
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's Ajax, Sporting, and an academy in Argentina. The money and resources they have compared to Chelsea is incomparable, but they're producing just as many players that go on and play pro.
And where did they?
I know where does it come? Where
Where do they
pro
go?
mean? And
Yeah, and where do they go around the world? That would be an
Yeah,
interesting.
the league table that I like looking at is this one that was around 2023, and I've just seen some stuff that was talking about Chelsea being the number 1 in the world for player output. And
if we take
player
Chelsea off
sales.
the table, we know Chelsea's a great academy, but other academies within England still have more resources than the Sportings, and Sporting are being able to produce more players than those academies.
Yeah. It's not to say that the other ones aren't doing good, but I get a feeling that English academies are doing quite well. They're producing players of high value. Our international team is doing far better now. From a player development point, yeah, they could do better, but it's all right.
So what's the argument?
Well, I'm
Or
just
what's the
interested
question?
with the data of like when you were talking there
yeah, I
around the
don't-
amount of players that were becoming professionals. Yeah, I was interested how England compares, like looking at your data.
Yeah. So if we look at the, then if you get a scholarship, I would hazard a guess that the English, so they're from slightly different times there, but I would hazard a guess that the English ones aren't far off that Italy and that Spanish comparison. It'd be interesting to find out. Part of the complexity of this is working out how many players that clubs bring in at the different levels, particularly the under-9s, the turnover of players and tracking where those players, when they come in, when they leave again, when they come back in, when they leave again, becomes a real difficult data capture exercise. Yeah, because you could capture at one point and the player not be there. They could have come in and gone back out before you capture again, and we've missed somebody leaving. Do you see what I mean? It's a really tricky.
And it was something.
The churn at that age is.
It was something
big.
that I wanted to talk about with you today because we talked about it off air, and you'd said that after the age of 18 or once they get their pro contract, it's likely that the player will, on average, move 5 times.
Yep, 5 times in 5 years on average. So they getting the pro. I think there's a big piece of knowledge exchange to be done between this data and parents and players on that journey between 18 and 21 and 23, 18, 21, 23, that sort of group. Because here's what happens. You get the higher you are, the better chance you've got of getting a pro contract. So if you're in a Premier League academy or Cat 1, you do have a better chance of getting a professional contract. It's like 80% in the Premier League. For the Championship clubs that we looked at, it was like 64. Then I think it was 51 and 46 in League 1 and League 2 respectively. But that's the first bit. And going back to what we were talking about in terms of facilitator players, that's almost the start of your journey of trying to then create a career. That's not, I've now got a career in the game. So in the data, we looked at how many moves players had and how many of those were loans. And if you take the cohort, there were we had a sample of 299 players. 167 of those got some form of contract within the game. within those 167 players, they averaged, in the first 5 years of their career, they averaged 5 moves. And of those 5 moves, 2 of them were loan deals. I can't think, I've looked into the research around this, I can't think of another industry. The arts is probably similar, potentially the military, where you train, you get that contract, and then you have such social upheaval, you have geographical moves, you have such insecurity in terms of your earning and your contract. It's a really, really unique thing. And the other caveat to add to this, because it is tempting to go, okay, 81% in the Premier League, let's get as high as we can in terms of the category of the academy. But there's 2 problems with that. Number one, the higher you start, the further you can fall. So let me put 2 scenarios to you, okay? Sean, you get your dream at Chelsea. Okay, there we go. You've got a pro contract at 18. Matt, you get your pro contract at Port Vale in League 2. Okay?
It was that rugby that killed me.
It was. So over the next 5 years, you both moved down the football pyramid. Okay? You got a nice 3-year contract, but they sent you out on loan. And then 5 years later, you were in the National League at Maidenhead. Okay? From the Premier League. So were you in those 5 years. Potentially that was harder for you to deal with, Sean, because you dropped from the Premier League and you went and you end up in the National League 5 years later. You will have been trying your hardest. You'll have been giving everything to training. Matt, you've dropped 1 league. Okay? So that you have to be a little bit careful in just thinking, oh, the higher we go up, the more chance we've got of making it, because you're conceptualizing making it as just that first pro. It's likely that your journey is going to be harder, not likely. It's a chance that your journey can be harder because you can fall further.
But why did I have to drop all the way down to Maidenhead?
You're good enough.
No,
right?
But why didn't I go on a loan move to Championship?
Yeah, so within that 5 years, what will have... I can think of a player off the top of my head, and I've been following him because he ended up a spell at the club I support, Sheffield Wednesday. Gets into the Premier League with his club. Club signs a lot of players. So he goes out on loan. First one was abroad. Didn't get many starts, came back. Went out on loan to a Championship club. To a League One club. A few starts, didn't really get anywhere with it. That club sent him back to the Premier League club. He then had his 2 loan deals for that season, so I had to sit out the rest of the loan, play some under-23s. He's now in a position where, yes, he's at a Premier League club, but he's not been able to gain any traction at a League One club. He then sits out the rest of that season, goes on loan back to a League One club. A problem occurs when the manager who takes over at that league, manager gets sacked, a manager takes over at that League One club who sent him back from his loan at a previous club he was at. So that's a bit of an unfortunate scenario. That club gets relegated to League Two, goes back to his Premier League club, contract runs out, and he's shipped out. He's now sat there after, so I think by this age he's 21, 22, so still you're looking and going really young. But in all those scenarios, he's now, you look at his CV and it's not, there's no proof on there that he can, want of a better phrase, do it at like a League One or a League Two level.
Yeah.
So you can see how clubs looking at that thinking, probably not. Just 3 years earlier, he was thinking, I've got to the Premier League. And he made appearances in the Championship with that club as they got to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And then I saw he went out to the MLS, and the MLS team have sent him on loan to somewhere in Sweden. And I'm looking at that thinking, that is unbelievable. I know he will have been trying his hardest. You know he will. He'll have been given everything. And I can see a scenario there where that player will have thought, what just happened there? I went from that moment of, I've got a pro, I'm playing games in the Championship, we've got promoted. Now, there's an element where there might have been a relatively decent wage from that club for 3 years. So if you've been savvy and invested some money or kept some aside, it's certainly not going to set you up for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So just that danger, I wouldn't stop anybody going to a Cat 1 academy because of what I'm saying now, but it's a reminder that getting to a Cat 1 academy, getting a professional contract in the Premier League, you still need to do the things that I talk about in terms of career coaching. You still need to think about preparing for what life will be like. And to a degree, even if that player had got a professional contract at that Premier League club, started games, landed $100,000 a week contract, you need to be prepared for that. Because when you get $100,000 a week, a lot of people, we know that you have issues with trust. You'll have a lot of friends who you didn't have friends before, who, where are you going to get legal advice from? Where are you going to get financial advice from? There's a whole raft of preparation that needs to go into if you get a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the point about how many end up bankrupt.
Yeah. I need to interrupt the podcast one more time. Did you know that We Make Footballers is a franchise business? We began franchising in 2015 and we now have over 60 franchises in operation across the UK, Dubai and US, serving over 10,000 players. If you're a talented coach but don't want to start your own coaching business alone, visit franchisewmf.com to find out how We Make Footballers can help you operate a successful football coaching company. One thing that I have been learning the more I have these conversations like this, it's like that there is two games going on. VAR has changed the football. People always talk about how the Premier League, the players are so looked after. And then academies, if you're in a Cat 1 top academy, and you're being prepared, let's use Man City as an example, and let's talk about Phil Foden and Rico Lewis, who on the internet often get called system players.
Yeah.
And so in their academy journey, let's imagine that Man City, they play the way the first team do. The kids dominate possession. They're all so tactically drilled. And so the skills that they will be developing through that, and again, I'm assuming because I'm not seeing Man City every week, but this is just feedback that I've had, they will be developing really high tactical understanding and amazing touch, but maybe not having as many jewels, or maybe not having the competitiveness that they might need.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So then they're being set up to go, and then they've gone and been successful getting into first team, but then some other players have then been that copy of that type of player, not been quite good enough to get into the first team. And if you then can't get into a top 4 Premier League club, it's like, all right, okay, let me do what everyone else is doing now. Let me go and try and get into non-league or the lower ones. But you haven't developed yourself to tackle hard or play that type of game, have defend set pieces well, because you haven't been exposed to it as much. I'm giving extreme examples, so I don't think it's as extreme as this, but I can see how this can happen.
Yeah. It is some feedback that I've got from talking to coaches and a couple of players. I remember one example, talking to a player who was a captain at, I think they were League 2 at the time, the club he was at, and him sort of talking about when they get academy players or under 21 players from the top clubs on loan, and the difference in their experiences of perhaps what they've been exposed to under 21 football versus the realities of a professional game. And he was a centre-back, and I think it might have been the player came in on loan and he was like a right-back, and it was at a summer barbecue we were talking, and he was sort of joking, saying he came in and then tried playing out from the back. And the guy was the captain and the centre-back going, it's my mortgage. Get that thing down the other end of the pitch and do not, And I could just add this image of like, I don't know, a 19-year-old sort of going, oh, all right, because he was centre back, tall, dominating figure. And I remember thinking, yeah, I bet that was a sort of extreme example of the differences. Yeah, I remember that example.
A friend of mine's an agent, and his niche and speciality is dealing with sort of 15 to 21s, getting them into, as far as I can.
Yeah.
And he said the first question that the clubs he talks to will ask is, are they coachable? And are they mentally resilient? Are they ready to come in and play men's football? Because we don't want a technically superb under 16 or under 18 coming in who, he can do all the fancy stuff, but we need a man ready to play men's football. And unless yeah, he's ready to step into that straight away. So then, on your point, like other Man Cities or our Cat 1 academies giving players those skills where when they leave a top academy, are they ready to meet a player who's going to bollock them about trying to play out from the back?
Yeah.
And they're ready to just be coachable, do what they're told by a manager and play a style of football they may not want to play.
Yeah, this might sound cynical, but I think you'll find a lot of players coachable. If by coachable you mean they'll do what they're told, because I think they probably do come out of academy with a clear understanding that the coach is the boss, and we listen to what they say. But then the cynic in me would say, do those Cat 1 academies care for if those players don't make it in their academy, and let's say they then moved to, mention Port Vale or somebody in League Two? I think that's the reality of that scenario, is that player is then a dispensable asset for that club, for that Cat 1 academy. So it's like, and then they went to Port Vale and they didn't. It was a real wake up call, and they couldn't really. They were trying to have a lot of touches, and they would they came across some, big centre midfielder who just kicked lumps out of them. Do the Cat 1 academy care now? Because you're of no more use to them. You're a disposable, and that's the brutal side of elite sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they're only. So I've got something on my website. That's the first plug for my website, which is the football needs Venn. So it's a Venn diagram, the two circles, and where they interlock. And in one circle you've got what the player needs, and in the other circle you've got what the club needs. And where the two circles cross is, of course, where what the club needs, which is to win football matches and make money or stay sustainable, and what the player needs, matching. Now, I firmly believe that clubs will pull out all the stops in terms of player care if they see a player who they think can either make them money or get to their first team. Like, they will really care for them. If they're a facilitator player, they will get some player care. There are plenty of very good player care officers working in clubs, but they'll get the stock player care that everybody else gets, and they'll get some ad hoc sessions around finance, legal stuff, drugs, and those sorts of things.
At that stage, there's criticism that comes from clubs, and they've got audits, and there's been a few examples where something bad has happened, and then the Premier League might look in and say, have you done things correctly? Have you shown the correct player care? And people need to cover their backs. It sometimes can go into covering your back more than actually. And there's might be people that work in player care that just think this is so unfair, and they're doing such great work with their players, and they think this is totally unreasonable. But there can be good practice going on at some clubs, often that have got a lot more investment, but then other clubs that have less, it's not reasonable for the demands that go on to one player care person to be looking after 300 players, and they simply can't do a good enough job, and so they just tick boxes.
So the 2 points I would add that I now speak to people in player care daily,
right?
There, and I reiterate the point. There are a lot of very, very good people, like morally, academy managers, heads of player care, and they are good people.
Yeah.
Like they are.
Yeah.
And they are trying, and they are working all hours. My take on this is there just comes a point where player care and elite sport clash, because elite sport is ruthless and it's about getting to the top. And what happens is those people in charge of player care, they work their backsides off. They do as much as they can, but they are never going to be, probably given the resource that they need. And ultimately, the other priorities of the club, i.e. winning matches, takes precedent. And people listening might be like, look, obviously, okay, So going back to the point we made earlier, that is just the way it is. Therefore, that's why I'm saying parents, players, you've got to take a bit of ownership as well. The player care in the club will help you. Listen to them, engage with what they're doing, but that is one part of a broader picture which you can actually be in control of. And the other point I would just make on this is I think there is an issue with the auditing. I think it's, from speaking to people in player care, heads of academies, watching them go through it, it doesn't do, it essentially does what Ofsted does. It goes in and checks in a non-developmental way, where, have you got this paperwork? Can you show me these qualifications for all these people? And all that clubs end up doing is coming out of that audit with like a relief that we passed it. That's not the way in which that should be done. It should be developmental. It should be working in. It should be understanding the constraints that occur in that club. What category are you? What resource have you got? What are some of the issues that you have? Have we got other examples from around the country where we could perhaps help with some best practice, and not here's Spurs, so maybe you could do this, and a Cat 3's going, well, yeah, Spurs, well done to them, but we're not going to be able to do that. We haven't got the resource. So it's not developmental enough. It's too, to me, it's too much of used as a stick to beat academies with, in the way that Ofsted has done that with schools. It isn't an approach of developmental.
I think, again, through this process of, we must have done like 50 episodes, so like I've learned so much in the years been doing this podcast, and come to sort of a way of thinking, and end up always going back to the root of why things happen, and coming into, it's like money.
Yeah,
that is going to be what is driving decision making ultimately. I say this to parents, like, there's often a narrative that comes through where it's like academies get criticised because they don't get players into the first team. And then even like Matthew and I were just having that debate a little bit ago, where I'm saying, yeah, but Chelsea have made 500 million in recent years. Their whole financial fair play is built off their academy.
Yeah.
It has got high output. The players that they're producing are being sold for millions. That academy is a very good business model. Sorry, like end up like plugging Chelsea, but I'm just using it as an example of a high productive academy. But it's like money is a factor. If you can make a player that's got high value that sells on, you're doing your job. And so then this is driving a lot. So then where you're talking about certain players being like discarded, or like the players that are of high value, they will get high player care. That will be ultimately driving stuff. As much as people care about the people and they want to be doing the right thing, ultimately the people at the very top will be deciding where resources get put.
Yeah. And you've never seen a scenario, have you, where a team's bottom of the league and fans would be sort of, I know, but we do look after our players. Like, that's just not what just not what elite sport is about. So you get, and this is where I come back to it clashing, and why I come back to saying to parents and young players, take ownership of this, take responsibility of this. A club isn't going to tell you if they are, in essence, just using you, but there could be that scenario. So we have got to teach younger players and work with parents to see that they can take a broader approach on career, on career coaching. And the approach I take isn't me sitting here talking to parents and saying, this is what you need to do. It's a coaching role. So it's about them learning and using the data themselves, interpreting it, putting those things into practice in their own world, reflecting on it, coming back, what worked, what didn't work, just like we would do if we were coaching out on the pitch. And getting them to do it so that if that happens, if they get to a point where the clubs go, don't need you anymore, you're in I'm not saying it's not going to be a distressing sort of a situation, but you're prepared. Something that can help you with that. You've not gone into a scenario thinking, it's not going to be us. We're going to be the ones who go on and make it in that scenario. And then, even if you are the one who makes it, you've got to be prepared for that.
What you talked about before with the 5 moves that happen after you get your professional contract, on average, you're going to do 5 moves.
Yeah.
And you then talked about the disruption to like geographically or socially and all the other elements of like just literally changing jobs in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
An academy who is preparing a player to be a footballer, and let's say they have got some player care resource or psychologists within the program. If I was thinking purely from a money perspective, and you've got some time with that psychologist, potentially you'd be instructing them to say, look, focus a lot on their mentality to play well on Saturday and play well. And then the person might be saying, yeah, but I also want to prepare them for if they are about to do 5 moves. And you're like, well, yeah, all right, spend 10 minutes at the end on that, but make sure they're prepared for Saturday, because their short-term interests of that club are to produce a player of value. If they get discarded, well, that's another problem.
Yeah.
But having said that, actually, they are going to have to go on loan. So the majority of players will go from a Cat 1 out on loan and then come back. So then they would want to give players tools for that.
Yeah, and there are certain clubs that have loan managers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like player care for loanees. That's what I'm after. So yeah, there are some clubs who work in that. I would throw a question back at you. Who pays that psychologist?
The club.
Okay.
Club paying it, yeah.
So it's very difficult for a psychologist, and we've seen this with physios, with doctors, to step out to say, I don't think this is the best thing for this player, when the person who is paying your wages wants this situation to occur. You know, it's akin to a psychologist coming out and saying the way that coach speaks to young players it's not right. Doesn't happen. Or no, it doesn't happen. It very rarely happens, and we've seen issues with club doctors, physios, the same sort of thing. So I'm going back to take some sort of ownership of this and start reading some books on players' careers, on what happened when they went out on loan. Start finding via social media other professionals who have retired, and start getting in touch with them and start listening to what they said about their career, what things are likely to be like. Start educating yourself on, again, the realities of professional football, not what you think it is via film, documentaries, or those sorts of things. Actually grasp what this is going to be like and start to plan that.
Can you, off the top of your head, recommend any books now to parents? Can you think of any that would be good a starting point?
Yep. So there is, if you want to go down the academic route, although it is a fantastic book, it's the guy who examined my PhD, and it's called A Labour of Love by Professor Martin Roderick, just in case he's listening. And so that is his PhD, where he interviewed 44 professional football players. There's also the, I think it's 16 Wonder Kids Who Didn't Make It book, which is, I forget who that's by now.
They'll find it.
We'll put it in the link. We'll put it in the link. Again, so one of the things that I do with the parents is I give them that book, and they make notes at the end of each chapter, because each chapter is a story of another kid who was put up there on a pedestal and then, in the words of the book, didn't make it. I think the point is didn't fulfill their potential. So it's sort of, they burst onto the scene at 16, 17, 18, and it was, wow, here's the next whoever, and things didn't turn out that way.
Yeah.
And what we do is we go through each chapter and we unpick, okay, what happened there? And so many of those things are uncontrollable. So injuries, for example, moves that didn't turn out how they thought, loss of form, and what you can do then is essentially then you start picking apart, going, okay, these things could happen, so let's prepare for the lot. You know, a loss of form does occur when you're out on loan, and then you can start to. But then there are elements in there where you think we could plan for some of these things as well.
Can we go back to the 80% at Cat 1?
Yep.
What were those statistics again?
So the 167 were awarded a pro contract. Okay. Premier League, 80%, the average was 80% of those got a professional contract. 55% from the Championship, 42% in League One, 38% in League Two.
So
Those are the averages.
First question, why do you think that was the case? Like Premier League down to League Two, 80% down to whatever it just was, 30, 40%.
Yeah.
Why are League Two clubs handing out less pro contracts?
So it's not necessarily that 80% got the pro contract at that club.
Right.
So I think what you're seeing there is the effect of, I didn't get a pro contract. Sean didn't get his pro contract at Chelsea. Back to the theme. Sorry. But Sheffield Wednesday took him.
Right.
Yeah. Because they're a Championship club and we think, well, we'll take a punt on he's been released from that club. So we think there's a chance. So that I would say that was given you. But at the same time, those clubs have got more resource to take a chance on more and have a bigger group in sort of the under 23 age group, potentially, I think, taking a chance on. He's not developed how we thought by 18, but if he's a late developer, there might be a chance there, so we'll give him another 2 years, not on loads of money, whereas a club, say a Sheffield Wednesday or potentially somebody in League One or something, they don't have that resource to take that chance on as many. Mm. So I think there's probably two things going on there.
So yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because we've kind of have that theory that Cat 1 academy players will trickle down into Cat 2 and Cat 2. So is there any research on Cat 2, Cat 3 players, where they end up?
Yeah, so let's look at where they ended up, because then we can pick this out a little bit further.
Just while you're doing that, I will just talk a little bit about what we see with reaction from parents, and working with our social media team on being involved in seeing a lot of the comments and the sentiment from parents. Like, if you put a post up talking about Category 1 players having much more of a high chance of becoming a footballer, then the Category 3 parents start attacking. And they're just like, and then that gets even worse with the ones who are in grassroots football, who are outside of academy. They start talking about Kevin Keegan, Jamie Vardy, Ian Wright. Yeah. They made
That's
it.
my next question. Sorry, have you got
that? Yes, so let's pick this. So this is how we've done it. If I start with the headlines here, so we had the 167 who got that professional contract at the age of 18. Between the ages of 18 and 26, okay, only 5% of that group, that was 8 players, managed to move up the football pyramid. Okay, so you had 167 players, only 8 of them managed to move up. 8 of them stayed at the same level. 58% of that group were moving down the football pyramid between the ages of 18 to 26. A quarter left the game completely, so 41 couldn't find them by the time they were at 26. 12 of them moved abroad. Now, I can't dig into that too much because I'd actually like to go back now. There's far more websites available now that sort of rank leagues around the world, and I think there's probably a little bit more we could dig down into that scenario. But the other stuff is, by the time they got to 26, so we had 167 players at the age of 18. By 26, there were 126 left. So that didn't drop off as quickly. But for me, the headline is how many were moving down. 96 of those players, of the 167, were moving down. There were 8 left in the Premier League, 14 players left in the Championship, 8 in League 2, 9 in League 1, 18 were in the National League, and 58 were lower than the National League. So 46% of those players who got a professional contract, 46% of the players who were still in the game at the age of 26 had moved down below National League level.
I'm just going to interrupt the podcast for 30 seconds to tell you about We Make Footballers. We Make Footballers are the largest football coaching provider to children aged 4 to 12 in the UK, operating across 200 facilities. We focus on developing the individual, working on the technical and physical components of the game, and it's had amazing results, with hundreds of our ex-players joining professional academies and 4 of our ex-players currently playing in the Premier League. Our program is built around small-sided play using indoor and outdoor facilities. Visit our website, wemakefootballers.com, to see if we have a training facility in your area. So to summarize what you're talking about there,
Yeah.
ultimately, you've got more chance of being a footballer if you're signed at a higher academy. However, it is nuanced based on what you'd said previously, because some players won't have the mental resilience to cope with dropping down. So it's not to say that just because you're at a higher academy, you're going to have a higher chance, because it might not be right for you. But broadly with the data, you have got a higher chance of being a footballer should you be at a higher academy.
Yeah. So this comes back to the caveat, which is reliable. There's a difference between using reliable data and, using reliable data and using data reliably. So this is a cross-sectional take on the whole cohort. What you shouldn't do with this is go, therefore, the best option for my kid is to get them into a Cat 1. Because there are so many more variables at play. They might go to a Cat 1 academy and that might really burst their bubble in terms of their confidence. Go back to something we've been talking about before. Would you be a facilitator player at a Cat 1 academy versus somebody at a Cat 3 academy that they're really focusing on developing? That's where I think the nuance comes in. The data that I've got here shows us across the whole cohort. And my job when I'm talking with parents is to then have this discussion. Don't then jump to okay, so that must mean that we have to. No, we have to talk about all of these scenarios. And maybe you do go to a Cat 1, but spot the signs of them not flourishing. Spot the signs of them when they aren't thriving, they aren't enjoying themselves, are they retreating within themselves? So maybe the option is to move to a different academy. And you can take ownership of that scenario. Are you prepared for getting a pro at 18, but then moving down 6 divisions, as the example that you said, Matt, around the dad taking his son to non-league football? There's a blog on the website I got a former colleague of mine to do on semi-professional football, on the realities of semi-professional football. A lot of people really enjoy their time in semi-professional football, and that could be where you end up. But there's also some other complexities with that as well that I think it's important for the family to be understanding of. Semi-professional football is a hectic lifestyle. You back at 2 a.m. in the morning and then up at 6 because you're off to your job. Loads of that. So the data give us that understanding of all. This is where we go back to all the routes that we've got to talk about. And the more we talk about them, the better prepared you are.
How many? Oh, sorry. You should speak.
Yeah. Is there any research done on grassroots players getting scholars or pros, kind of getting into academies at under 15, under 16?
I've not come. I did do that. That isn't something that I looked at because I started with them when they were already in an academy, and I did some digging around. I couldn't find anything around the cohort study that go the other way. One of the slight tricky parts of that sort of a study and all the data that I've looked at is what tends to occur is we work retrospectively. So we take the England squad and the study is, or the newspaper article is, where did they come from? And that's, I think, where you pick up the Jamie Vardy scenario, and it gives this picture of, whoa, so there's like a 25-man squad and one of those works up from non-league. What the study would need to be is get a cohort of non-league, and you'd have to get a big cohort in there and then track them and then try and track them. The difficulty with that is the reporting on non-league is not as easy. But I think it would be a really, really innovative study to try and trace it the other way. And over, say, a 5-year period, find people in there now who are 14, 15, in those sorts of, in clubs that are in perhaps National League North and South, or just under, and then see what happened with them, and see if any made the way up.
How many players and parents are you working with? I mean, I know you started things in February this year.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's a handful at the moment.
Yeah.
It's so, but I work with them in different ways.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff, I've just got an online course about to start in the new year,
Right.
which is very much what I would say the foundation of what I offer, where you subscribe just with a one-off fee, and it's me talking over some stuff with some like activity sheets, and that is designed at those people who perhaps just want to dip the toe in a little bit and understand what I do, have a go at some of the activities that we do.
Yeah.
I do some consulting, which is one-on-one. So you can sign up, and we work every other week for an hour and a half. We drill down into the data. We drill down into the qualitative data as well. And depending on where you are, we develop a roadmap of where you're trying to get to, where we are, and then put basically building blocks in place, and you go away and you do activities between each of the sessions which start those conversations that need to be had around the data.
Yeah.
You write a diary, you reflect on that, you bring that back to the discussion every other week, and we develop that playbook around where you're trying to get to and what are the different scenarios that you're going to be that you're going to be facing. You can do that over a full year, so you work every other week over a full year, or you can work just over 24 weeks, so a shorter period of time, and largely that depends on where you are in the journey. So the first bit of this, and I will say this, is you just jump on and we have a chat. So you can go onto the website and you can sign up find out a bit more, and we go online for an hour. I did one the other night where we chatted with the mum and dad and the player, and that's very much me trying to understand, are they right for me and am I right for them? So that we're going, because this is a one-on-one consultation, I want them to be really clear on how much work I'm going to be asking them to sort of undertake between each session. If we do a bit of expectation setting, and to be honest, if parents are sort of like, no, he's going to be in the Premier League, I'm thinking, this might not be the right time for me to be working with you, because how much are you actually going to gain from this? So we start off very easy. We just have the chat, a bit like we're having now, and then people come back to me going, actually, I think we do want to know a little bit more about this. There are a lot of and then I do some work in clubs. So I go into clubs and try and do parent induction evenings. I've done quite a bit of work around parents and the communication side of things. So working with clubs who have perhaps noticed that there's a bit of an issue between communication with parents or expectations of parents.
Yeah.
Do that side of things as well. And the data are quite good for that on both sides.
So you ultimately outsourced player care.
I'm a safe space where people can develop their own person care. So my unique selling point is that I am data driven. Nothing that we do isn't underpinned by research. It's underpinned by research. It's underpinned by the data. And the second unique selling point for me is that I am independent of clubs. Yeah. I don't even ask which club your son or is at. I don't care. Some people volunteer it, but that isn't the point. So it doesn't make any difference to me. I kind of need to know what league they're in.
Yeah.
And that helps. But it makes no difference. And what this is a safe space. As you well know, there are certain things that players and parents struggle to say in clubs because they're a bit worried who might hear. They're perhaps a bit worried if they're being critical. I hear a lot, like, I'm not sure I trust this coach. Well, obviously, you can't have that conversation at the club. And a lot of the concern is, if I say this, will that damage the chances of my child getting a contract for the next year?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, you can do this independent of clubs. The reason I work over a period of time is because I want to build up a relationship with you. I want to learn about you and your wider thoughts about where you want to be, about perhaps some stuff around your family situation. Because the other thing with player care in clubs is it tends to be one-stop shop. Somebody comes in, does a workshop on this. Somebody comes in, does another workshop, and then 3 years later, you need that player to remember that guy came in and did that workshop on going to America, and that was the company name. What I'm saying here is we can do this over a longer period of time. I'm there, and we can build up a relationship. It's much more of a long-standing developmental approach to person care.
What age is the youngest that a player could start working with you?
Probably 13, 14,
Okay.
I think. And obviously that would be with parents. Don't do,
And would it
on their own.
just be players that live in England?
No, I think there were some groups in the in the study who'd come across a fair chunk who'd come across from the island of Ireland, and a few further afield. But I think if you, I know going back into the data now, there are more players who have come from different countries probably than I got the snapshot of in 2010. So yeah, no. If people are out there thinking, what is it like in a football academy? I mean, that's the online course that's coming. Here are 303 players who, in focus groups, sat round. These went before you, and here's what they said it was like when there was no coach listening. And honestly, the PhD was, for me, was such an enlightening process in what I realised in sitting with all those lads is nobody has asked them this. So the first thing I said is, what's it like? And in so many of the, so the 21 clubs, and I did 2 focus groups in each, so many of those scenarios, the lads just went. Off they went, and I had to say, right, hang on, whoa, just slow down a bit, because I've got to transcribe this focus group. And they were like, no, we need to say this. Right, this, there, and I'm thinking, whoa, halt. And it took me, 4 or 5 clubs into the 21 club visits, and I suddenly thought, yes, because nobody ever asks them. They can't complain, because they're in such a scenario where they can moan within certain parameters, but they can't be honest of going, this is how the coach talks to us. This is how, this is how the professionals treat us. Because people go, well, yeah, get on with it.
In business, good companies reach out to their customers and are always seeking feedback to understand how they're performing and find out some failure before it ends up turning into a bad review or the product failing. So they're constantly seeking. You go to a restaurant, you're going to get an email the next 5 minutes later asking how it was. I don't think football clubs are like that.
No.
I don't think football clubs are proactive all the time to say, tell us how that training session was tonight for your child. Can you star it out of 5? Can you give us some ideas this month? What could make things better for you? What could we do to improve things? I don't think that goes on. I think that a lot of the academies think that they know best, and they also don't want to give parents that power. They maybe are worried that if they start asking those questions, then the parents will start becoming demanding and getting too powerful. I don't know if there's been your experience as well.
That's exactly what I do in terms of the parent expectation work that I do. The other thing I would add is, in business, a complaint is a piece of data. A complaint is somebody who came to you. In most cases, a complaint is somebody who came to you. They care enough about your business because they came to you, and now they're giving you an insight into their mind about how the expectations they had weren't met. Now, there's 2 things you can do with that. You can then go, oh, well, that's their fault because they had different expectations to what I serve. Or you can see it as, okay, what they thought they were getting from us isn't what we're showing. And in the work that I do with clubs, I've actually got a report I'm just writing at the moment, so I'm more than happy to share it with you. And anybody who wants it, I'm going to give it out for free. Is it's very easy to see parents as a threat. And I see scenarios where parents turn up, right, we'd like you to turn up, drop off Sean, and then could you go and stand over there without any emotion and just and stand there? Let us coach, and then when it's over, we then need you to go.
Yeah.
So
Some clubs even ban the parents from even watching the training,
Yeah.
which I think is weird.
so you've got, and there are clubs out there who are trying to do this. You've got to bring the parents with you. You've got to, and there's a great theory which is bridging and bonding theory. Bonding theory is where we get groups of people bonded together over similar interests, but they don't mix. And what occurs with that is skepticism, rumour. There's a stigma about the other group. We start thinking we know what they're doing, and we see it all the time in sort of communities. That's bonding theory. What I'm doing with clubs is to get them to think more in terms of bridging, bringing together the different groups of people on more occasions. And what we do when that occurs is we start to realise, actually, oh, that's what their life is really like. We start to see similarities between the two of us.
Yeah.
Some of those coaches, their parents as well. Who thought that? Who'd have thought that? So the coaches start looking at understanding the parents, realising that getting them here for 5 o'clock is an absolute nightmare, and they have to move heaven and earth to try and do that. So, and when you do that, I'm not saying that it's easy, but what you get across the whole group is an increased level of trust, an increased level of understanding, and you just let them in to your world and vice versa. And the activities that I do is all about getting people to walk in other people's shoes.
It's tough. There's a balance because, as well as I do, a lot of players, when they're training or playing, are constantly looking over to their parents. So if their parents aren't there, we take that away from them. Mm-hmm. The expectation on the player, if the parent is there watching them. So a lot of players will thrive when the parent isn't there. So I can understand why some clubs want to try and do that. And then parents can't control themselves. They have to shout whatever comes to their mind. So if they are there, ideally you want them just to encourage and support and not coach. But they're going to coach. Like, they can't help themselves.
Yeah, but they're so far away. Often, in my experience in academies, like in the London ones, it's not too bad. I think once they get signed, under 9s, under 8s, under 9s, under 10s, they settle down.
Yeah.
Isn't it about bringing them with you on what you're trying to achieve? And to me, it's not perfect, but it's about letting the parents know why you want them to behave in that way. Do you see what I mean? And making sure that, because I think that comes back to, I've seen like WhatsApp messages, which is, please can you only encourage from the sideline in a WhatsApp group. You can see how a parent is, it's like, okay, well, they've sent that out. Or the other thing, and this is what we move away from in the clubs that I'm working with, is clubs giving parents rules. So all the work that I do with clubs is about co-constructing a set of standards. You get the parents to say, if you were a coach, how would you want a parent to act? And if you were your child, how do you think they want you to act? And then you go to the coaches and say, okay, coaches, if you were parents on the sideline, what would you want from a coach? And if you were a kid, they're quite good at doing that. And then the final bit of that is you go to the kids and you say, okay, kids, no coaches or parents in the room, and this is all anonymized. How do you want the coaches to be? How do you want the parents to be? And now what you've got is a whole set of data, and the final piece of the jigsaw is coming together going, here's some co-constructed standards. It's not the club going, oh, well, thanks for bringing Sean. Sean, you signed at under 10, and then to your parents, they're the rules. What you've got there is a group of standards, and you go, actually, we've all brought that together. And what that opens up for me is the parents self-regulating a little bit their behaviour and their expectations. Because to be honest, the coaches haven't got time. It's an extra resource to try and also manage the parents.
Yeah.
So it allows each group into each other's world and walk. It's not a case of it being perfect, and there's still some confrontation there. But that is so much better than the right parents. Just keep parents as far away from me as we can.
Yeah.
And well, we do these review meetings, and then that's it. A parent said to me, he did one of the sessions. He said, "I find it really funny that I get a WhatsApp. I get WhatsApps that talk to me like I'm 12, and my 12-year-old son gets spoken to like he's 25." And he said, "I watch coaching sessions where I'm thinking he's not going to be taking that in, and then the next thing is it's WhatsApp, meet in the change rooms at 7." Like, it's you've got that. They are such a parents and support around the player. They are such a big part of how that player is going to develop. I think you've got to try and bring them with you. Try.
No,
try.
100%.
Yeah.
There needs to be a better balance, and I said it right at the start: communication between clubs and parents needs to improve, because we know coaches will take a session and they will not talk to the parents whatsoever at all, and the parent might want just a quick 2-minute chat with the coach. It could have been about anything. So I was talking to Dad the other day. Son had a really bad day at school. He could have just potentially went to say to the coach, "Look, he was off it tonight, but look, this has happened at school."
Yeah.
But yeah, coaches are very like, nothing to do with you until the review date or until an official meeting. So it needs, but at the same time, if you've got parents constantly watching, and you'll know this as well as me, you're going to have parents that are saying, "When you did this, you should have done that. When you done," and then it's going to go against what the coaches want. And then I say typical. There are parents out there that want their children to stay on the ball and be the star within the team. So then you're going to have parents putting really, really tough expectations on the player and wanting them to do certain things. So then the player's going to get the ball. My coach wants me to do this. Dad's watching. He told me I need to stay on the ball a lot more.
Yeah.
It's a very tough one to balance.
True. I'll give you a couple of examples on that. So I was listening to another podcast the other day, which was Steve Salis. Have you come across Steve? He's working at Sutton United at the moment. He the first time I saw him was on the Sunderland documentary, Sunderland Till I Die. So he was working there. He's working at Sutton United now. He does stuff on leadership, another good book. And the first thing he told Sutton United to do when he worked there is bring the supporters groups in and sat them down, and the board were there as well, and said, "Look, this is what we're trying to achieve," and asked the manager to speak as well. Because it's the same sort of scenario of, as a manager or as a club, you can see the fans as a problem. They're shouting from the sidelines what they think they know about football. Or you can try and bring them with you and let you into your world of what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's the scenario where it's saying it's not perfect, but it's a much better approach to trying to try and help. And but the final point I will say is, of course, there are clubs where those coaches are part-time. They're not employed there all the time. They're going to have a finite amount of time as well. So there is that tension, and the resource element of that has to be taken into account. But it's work. Like I say, it's work I'm doing with clubs, and I think it's trying to get them on side so they become an advocate for you. They become a help for you. Or more of the parents will become a help for you. That's sort of the aim there.
But really, like the last couple of questions, the one that I want to just stick on to about parents who can work with you, because I'm sure that people listening who've got kids in and around academy football are going to be listening to the stat that the average player is going to move 5 times. So I need to prepare my kid for that. And probably the academy is not preparing them. But Chris sounds like he would give my child some of those tools. If I invested some sessions, it might cost me a bit, but it's going to increase that chance of them becoming a footballer when they start moving about. And also, probably it's going to give them some good life skills.
Yeah, thriving in life.
That's it. So I can see people are going to want to work with you. What maybe some parents might be nervous about is that, oh no, like he's going to share all this data that there's no chance of him making it, and then my kid's going to get in a bad mindset. Like, how would you respond to that?
that you can do that you can do both.
Yeah.
I am not somebody who's going to get on that call and go, right, look, forget this silly idea, because I can't. As much as I'm saying, right, you can't predict who's going to make it. I also can't sit there and go, right, Sean, there's no chance of you making it, because somebody's got to.
You saw him play, you would have said
So,
that.
right, okay. Apart from
Hey,
that.
come on.
Sorry, you, Matt.
me
then.
up.
Let's go with you, Matt.
He's exaggerating.
So, do you see what I mean? And I don't see it as my role to get on and say, right, just give up with this. Look at all this data. What I am saying is that we can prepare for all of this. We can understand the realities of this journey that you're going to be on. You can look at the positives that you're going to get from an academy experience. For a lot of kids, that could be the first time they go abroad.
Yeah.
You know, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are positives that you can take from this. And I actually think you can take more of those positives by looking at this data, because then you see it for what it is. It's a developmental experience that you're on, and in some respects you are fortunate to be on. I want you to be in that environment, enjoying it for what it is. I want you to be present in that moment. I want you to be ready to take opportunities when they come your way, because you knew that they were coming. That loan deal, for example. So it's not a case of putting players off.
Yeah.
It's a case of sitting down, let's look at this journey in the round, and then you are more present and you can enjoy and be in that moment
And I guess
as much as you possibly can be.
And I guess setting goals to
Yep.
say, right, you're in this position. Okay, it's important that in 2 months' time you've achieved this goal, and 6 months' time you're here. Maybe is that what would go on?
But they will develop themselves. Yep. So we work with a microcycle, a mesocycle, a macrocycle. What are the long term? So that's a 1 year cycle look like. What does a month cycle look like? And in the middle of that, break it down into the year into 3 parts.
Yeah.
So then you can start to set your own targets, your own goals. What's within the realms of I can control this? What's outside of my control?
Yeah.
Okay. And there are things that so you can split this down into 3 things that I can control personally, things that as a team we can control. And when I say team, I don't mean your football club.
Yeah.
I mean the team, you as a player, your parents, guardians, wider group. So what can we as a group control?
Yeah.
And then in this third column here, what are the things that we can't control?
Yeah.
Refereeing decisions. All right. What are things that we are wasting energy with over here, when we could be using that energy on column 1 and column 2, which is things that I can control and things that we as a team can control.
I love it. I'm sold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to work on
still-
making some babies, and then 13 years' time, I'm going to come to you and then say, yeah, right, the 13-year-olds, they're ready.
That's it. Okay. I look forward to that. Yeah. No. Anybody, like I say, if anybody just wants to, no pressure. If anybody just wants to come on and have a chat about their scenario, because there are people out there who are perhaps nervous. It's easier for us because we've got an insight into the industry, haven't we? There are some people out there who perhaps the first time they haven't had a child who's gone through this before. Jump on, have a chat, have a look at what we do, talk about your scenario, and if it's not for you, fine, but it's there as a resource. There's the blog that I put on each week as well, and a newsletter. I've got a few guest blogs on there. So one's just gone out today from a former player.
What's your website, Chris?
chrisplatts.co.uk.
Cool.
I would
Yeah.
we run out of time, or we were right?
No, we're running out of time.
No, I was just
Sorry.
gonna say, because we spoke about it before. If you were to ask, just going right back to the first point, if you was to ask a 10-year-old, do you want to be a professional football player, and you take them to Grimsby, and you say, right, you're from London, you're gonna have to move to Grimsby on your own as an 18-year-old, and live and play for Grimsby. Like, is that that's professional football? That's, chances are that's where you're gonna end up. Is that what you want? So then, the earlier you can introduce that scenario to a player, I think the better, because we're just caught up a little bit in this Premier League thing.
Spot on. Romanticizing was the phrase you used earlier.
Yeah,
Love
if you could
that.
be a little bit more pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
And, do you work with like grassroots players as well?
Yeah, Yeah, if they want to talk about their scenario, yeah, jump on. Let's have that chat. The thing with it as well is I'm learning as well all the time. So it's really good to speak to parents because it validates data. They come on and they say things, and then I'll say something back, and they go, "Oh, how did you know?" Because it's in the data. It's there.
I think there will be. We've gone back and forth on this, but the amount of good coaching and good grassroots clubs there are now, I think being in an academy isn't the be all and end all, and is not as necessary as it was before.
Yeah.
I think there's so much good work done in the grassroots scene that grassroots are going to start producing a lot of very good players, and they're going to go on to play at a very, very high level as well. So yeah, that's why I threw it out
their
there.
journey's worth exploring.
Final question for you, Chris.
The closing tradition.
The closing
Okay,
tradition.
the closing tradition that started
What-
3 episodes ago.
That's not true. It's a long-standing tradition, and we asked the guests to talk about their proudest moment in football.
Right, the proudest moment. Well, I mean, mine's going to come to my PhD. I know it's not in football, but it's the research of it. It was 4 months of travelling over 3,000 miles up and down the country, getting in and speaking to these lads, and the fact that I am now able to give them a voice, and their views and their experiences are now informing the next generation is something that I am extremely proud of. Extremely proud of, and I thank them all for that.
No, you should be. I mean, yeah, we've got to know each other over these last few months, and I'm a huge fan of your work, and I've been really enjoyed listening to you today. I've learned a lot myself.
Thank you.
It's such an important subject, player care, and not even just the idea of a player falling out the game and being able to cope with that, which I think is thought about a lot when we think about player care, but just for the improve their chances of becoming a footballer, improve the chances by giving kids tools to go on, understand the data that you're going to change clubs, it's going to happen, but bounce back and step up and not fall out the game.
Take some ownership of your career, whatever that looks like, and of course that could be in the game. But take ownership of that.
Thank you so much, Chris.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.